Good evening, class. This is your teacher, Teacher Franco. Today I'm going to take you through the basic concepts behind the chapter of homeostasis. This can help, or it can be helpful for advanced level learners for the new competence-based curriculum. We are going to look at homeostasis, which is one of the chapters that we are supposed to cover for our A-level syllabus. And basically, we shall be looking at what homeostasis is. Homeostasis is simply the process by which living organisms maintain a stable internal environment. When you look at living organisms, they have cells. They are made up of cells that require optimum conditions for them to function very well. There is need for us to study homeostasis because it is a very vital process in the functioning and survival of living things. So we are looking at the significance. What is the significance? What is the significance? Or what is the advantage of having a stable internal environment? One, we shall look at we realize that the body is made up of cells, and cells contain enzymes. These enzymes control metabolic reactions, and we well know that enzymes work within narrow temperature and pH ranges. For example, we well know that when temperatures are very high, enzymes become denatured. So there is need for the body to maintain the temperature at an optimum temperature for proper enzyme activity. The same applies to pH. We know that enzymes within our cells work within specific pH ranges. For example, the digestive enzymes like pepsin. Pepsin works in the stomach, and it specifically works in an acidic pH range. So if you change the pH of the stomach, you're going to have stomach complications such as indigestion. So there is need for the body to have an optimum pH of the body fluids, of the cell fluids, for the enzymes to work very well. This helps to keep the conditions stable, preventing denaturation or loss of enzyme activity. Secondly, we have to look at the fact that the body requires constant concentrations of water, salt, glucose, and oxygen. These are very important in cellular respiration, such that fluctuations or changes or deviations too high or too low can disrupt cellular processes such as respiration, protein synthesis, and nerve impulse transmission. When we talk about metabolic reactions, basically we are looking at respiration and some other processes that result into breakdown and building of molecules within the body. Thirdly, we look at efficient energy use. When we keep internal conditions constant, the body avoids wastage of energy, because when you are you're looking at wastage of energy. If the imbalances in the body are too high, to bring them back to the normal set points, you're going to use a lot of energy. So it's better that these variations are kept within ranges that are very normal, so that we should not have those too high or too low fluctuations that will cause a lot of energy wastage to be corrected. This ensures that the little energy that we have in the body is used for growth, you can use it for movement, and you can use it for repair and reproduction because these processes require energy in our body. The other point is adaptation to external changes. An organism has an external environment. So when there are changes within its external environment, organisms will have to respond. Homeostatic mechanisms will allow the organism to be able to survive in those conditions, the changing conditions, so that it maintains its internal environment despite the external fluctuations in the what in the environment. For example, if temperature it changes, it means that this external temperature is going to affect the internal temperature of the organism. This will result into failure of the organism's enzymes to work. So when the environment changes, the organism has to change and keep its internal environment constant despite the changes in the fluctuations of the external environment. Then another point, we shall look at protection of vital organs and systems. One example is constant blood sugar prevents brain damage. When there is too much sugar in the blood, it can result into a brain damage, or it can even cause damage to the eyes. So keeping the blood sugar constant will have to prevent such situations. Then a stable body temperature prevents hypothermia or heat stroke. When temperatures are too high, the body can stop working, resulting into a heat stroke. Stable water balance prevents dehydration or swelling of cells. If there is too much water, the cells can swell, they become too turgid. Humans and other animals lack cell walls that can resist the turgor pressure of the cells. So this water has to be kept within a certain range to avoid swelling and bursting of cells. So in the next thing, we shall basically, we in summary, homeostasis ensures survival, health, and efficiency of biological functions by keeping the internal environment stable despite the changes in the external environment. So when we talk of homeostasis, we are meaning that system that helps to keep these these body parameters constant, so that they should not overshoot, or they should not undershoot, because that would ultimately affect the functioning of the body. So an efficient homeostatic system, when we talk of an homeostatic system, we are meaning, for example, if we are looking at temperature, we are looking at if the temperature goes above the normal temperature, for example, which is 37 degrees centigrade. If the temperature is going to go above 37, it means that it is now above the normal set point. So what is the body going to do to ensure that it goes back to normal? That is what we are looking at. Our body has a mechanism that helps to bring, for example, the temperature that has gone higher back to the normal set point, 37, which is favorable for enzyme activity. If it goes below 37, still the body is going to carry out processes that will help to raise the temperature and bring it back to normal. That is what we shall be looking at in homeostasis. So an efficient homeostatic system has very many components. The first one being the stimulus, the change that is going to happen within the internal or the external environment that is going to cause a disruption of the normal set point. There is a stimulus, there is something that's going to cause a change in a certain parameter or a certain component of the body. For example, a rise in body temperature during hot weather. It is the hot weather that is going to cause a rise in body temperature. So this hot weather is called the stimulus. So what is going to receive this stimulus? When we talk about a stimulus, it could be external or it could be internal. For example, hot weather, that is external stimulus. For example, when blood glucose level increases, that one is an internal stimulus. When carbon dioxide concentration increases in the body, that is an internal stimulus. When the pH of the body fluid, tissue fluids increases, that is an internal stimulus. But when it is too cold, that is an external stimulus because it will automatically cause a decrease in the body temperature so that it may even drop below the normal set point of 57. So in our bodies have what we call sensors or receptors. These ones help us to detect the changes in the internal environment. These receptors will have to send information about the change in the control center. The control center could be the brain. The control center could be the brain. For example, temperature receptors in the skin and the hypothalamus, they help to detect the changes in heat within the body. The hypothalamus and the skin. These contain receptor cells that help to detect the changes in the temperature, the internal body temperature. So the third component of a homeostatic system is the control center, what we call a coordinator or an integrator. Usually this is the brain. For example, the hypothalamus or the spinal cord. They receive information from the receptors and compare it to the normal set point. They compare it to the normal set point and decide the corrective action. There is what we call the corrective action. What is the body going to do given that a certain normal set point has been exceeded or it has been lowered so much? For example, the hypothalamus is going to compare the actual body temperature to 37 degrees centigrade, and it will determine that the temperature has either gone higher or has gone lower, so that now a response is going to be produced, and that is the corrective action. The body will respond to the temperature, whether it has gone too high, whether it has gone too low. The body is going to respond to bring it back to normal. So we have what we call the effector organs. These are organs or tissues or cells that carry out the corrective action as instructed by the control center. For example, the sweat glands are going to help us to produce sweat to cool the body when temperatures are too high. When temperatures are too cold, the muscles can shiver, or there is that spontaneous contraction that is going to generate heat within the body. This one is going to help to raise the temperature owing to the fact that the temperature has decreased below the normal set point. Sweat glands will have to produce sweat so that the sweat is going to evaporate out of the body with the heat, and that too much heat is lost to the surrounding, resulting into cooling of the body. So lastly, we have the feedback mechanism. The feedback mechanism is the response that helps to restore the balance. For example, I've talked about sweating. Sweating will help to lower the temperature. So when it lowers the temperature, it's going to take it back to the normal set point. So it is something that is opposing what has had caused what? What has caused an increase. So what tries to oppose it, we shall call it a negative feedback. Negative feedback is a corrective response that reverses. It's going to reverse. It reverses the original change. And this is the most common feedback mechanism. For example, if blood sugar is going to rise, if it rises, if blood sugar rises, for example, insulin is produced by the pancreas to ensure that it is lowered back to the normal set point. That one is called a negative feedback. You see, there was a rise. What the body does is something that is going to cause a decrease so that it goes back to what? it goes back to normal. Then we have another type of correction, which is the positive feedback mechanism. This one works contrary to the negative feedback mechanism in that the response tries to amplify the change. Instead of lowering what or increasing, instead it is going to amplify the change. For example, if there is oxytocin release during birth, more oxytocin release is going to cause even more contractions. Instead of lowering them, it is even going to cause a higher increase. So the response is amplified due to positive feedback mechanism. This one can also be seen in blood clotting. When platelets accumulate or clump around an injured point, it will cause even more platelets to come and clump around that area, resulting into healing. So in summary, an efficient homeostatic system should have a stimulus, should have a receptor, what is going to detect the stimulus. Then it should be able to send information to the control center, which is going to direct corrective measures that will be done by the effector organ. And the effector organs will have to carry out feedback mechanisms, the responses that will have to reverse what caused the change, and a normal set point will be acquired, resulting to that balance, that homeostatic control that we have been talking about. So one such example of homeostatic control is temperature regulation. So in today's lesson, we're going to focus on temperature regulation. So when we are looking at temperature regulation, basically our syllabus is concerned with endothermic organisms, because in this curriculum we are basically centered on humans. We want students to study biology, but basically focusing on humans. We are not looking at goats. Goats will come in when, for example, you go to agriculture, but basically here we are looking at humans. Birds will come in as by the way, but what we are centered on, they are endotherms, but specifically the humans. So you will see that most of our notes will basically be centered on human biology rather than looking at animal biology as a whole. So we shall look at temperature regulation. Of course, we have had instances where temperatures increase and you feel restless because the temperatures are too high. There are situations where temperatures are too low. You feel very cold. You want to cover yourself with a very heavy blanket. But there are ways the body can help to reverse because the external temperature affects the internal temperature. Our bodies have a mechanism of trying to correct those temperature fluctuations so that at least the body temperature should be kept within a range where enzymes are going to fully function. They are going to efficiently function. So endotherms. Endotherms, for example, mammals and birds, are organisms, you can call them homeotherms, are organisms that maintain a stable high internal body temperature. They maintain an internal body temperature. They are able to maintain it constant. Internal body temperature should be maintained constant, and it is largely dependent on the external environment by using metabolic heat. The survival of organisms in varying temperatures, the homotherms, relies on a coordinated set of physiological, these are internal automatic systems, and behavioral. Our body temperatures to be regulated will be something that is coordinated between the internal body mechanisms, which is the homeostatic control, and then the behavioral mechanisms. But all will be driven by the coordinating center, as we shall see. So basically, we shall start with the physiological adaptations. How does the body internally regulate the body temperature? So first, we shall look at the physiological adaptations to the cold. You're looking at, you're looking at the cold. When temperatures are too low, how does the body respond to ensure that the temperature goes back to normal? a normal set point where the body enzymes can fully function. So this one is going, basically the physiological mechanisms are aimed at heat generation and retention. Heat can be generated, but you may easily lose it. So once heat has been generated in the body, this heat must be maintained. So the body tries to maintain the temperatures constant by ensuring that once the heat has been generated, it cannot be easily lost. So this mechanism helps to increase the production of heat, which is sometimes called thermogenesis, and reduce its loss. So we are looking at thermogenesis, heat production. The body can shiver, something we call shivering thermogenesis. Shivering thermogenesis is the generation of heat in the body by rhythmic muscle contraction. Sometimes when we feel too cold, you find that our body is shivers. There is that spontaneous contraction of the muscles. This one helps to generate some heat with no mechanical work being done. So in movement, when you are trying to walk, there is heat generation generated in the body. But when you shiver, this is something that is spontaneous. So it generates heat, and this heat is going to help to increase the temperature back and increase the temperature so that it is restored back to the normal set point. The second, the second point is non-shivering thermogenesis. This one occurs because we have the subcutaneous fat. The subcutaneous fat is what we call the brown adipose tissue. The brown adipose tissue, for example, in the newborns and in hibernating animals, helps helps to conserve heat, helps to conserve heat, and it helps in breaking down ATP so that the ATP that has been manufactured can easily break down and release the heat. So heat is generated from ATP, and this one happens in the brown adipose tissue, meaning that energy is released directly as heat instead of being stored as ATP. So there is also increased basal metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate is the metabolic rate of the body when we are at rest. So endotherms have higher metabolic rates compared to ectotherms, but they can increase it further in cold conditions through the release of hormones like thyroxine or adrenaline. Adrenaline is what we call epinephrine. So the heat can be released because there is increased breakdown of glucose due to the release of thyroxine and due to release of adrenaline. That is during aerobic respiration, because these hormones try to increase the rate of breakdown of glucose. This one will result into increased heat, and that heat will have to help the heat to be restored back to the normal set point. Then secondly, we are looking at the body has generated heat, but still it should look for ways of ensuring that the heat cannot easily be lost. That one is insulation and heat conservation. The first thing is piloerection or feather fluffing. The hair stands. This is because the muscles at the base of the hair, what we call the erectile muscles, contract and cause the hair to stand up. When the hair stands up, it is going to trap a layer of hair around it, around the skin. And because air is a bad conductor of heat, the air is going to work as an insulator. It's going to work as an insulator against heat loss. And this one will prevent the loss of heat from the body. So the other point is the fats. The fats that we have in the body, which we call the subcutaneous fat, is part of the adipose tissue. This one helps to because fats are very poor at conducting heat. They help the body in trying to insulate against heat. For example, in aquatic animals like the whales, like the seals, and the polar animals which live in very cold environments like the polar bears. You can find them in the Antarctic. Then the other point is vasoconstriction. The smooth muscles surrounding the arterioles or the blood vessels near the skin, they try to contract and narrow the blood vessels, the narrowing of the blood vessels, the diameter of the blood vessels. To constrict is to reduce in diameter. This ensures that there is reduced blood flow to the skin or to the body extremities like the ears, the arms, and the legs. So you realize that there is less blood flowing. So the less the blood volume that flows to these parts, the less the heat that is going to be lost from the body through those parts. Then we have what we call the countercurrent heat exchange. Countercurrent heat exchange simply means a mechanism in which the blood vessels are arranged so that the artery is in close proximity with the veins, so that when warm arterial blood is flowing out, it tries to warm, exchange the heat with the venous blood, such that the heat that was in the warm arterial blood is maintained within the body by being exchanged with the venous blood. And by so doing, the heat will not be lost to the surrounding. That one is called countercurrent heat exchange, and you can find it in some organisms. Not all the organs, you can find them, for example, in the legs of the birds, you can find it in the Arctic animal ponds. Then this flowchart is trying to show what exactly happens when the temperature increases above the normal set point, and how the body responds. So basically, that is what we are looking at under temperature regulation. So there are physiological adaptations to heat, how heat can be lost, because we have been looking at how you can conserve heat. That is when the temperatures have dropped below the normal set point, when there is coldness, for example, in the environment. Now we are looking at how does the body respond when the temperatures are too high. The body will respond by ensuring that there is increased heat loss, so that this heat loss should not affect the internal body systems, for example, enzyme activity. So the body ensures that it loses heat, so that the heat is restored back to normal. One of the things that happens physiologically is vasodilation. Vasodilation is the opposite of vasoconstriction. In vasoconstriction, we said that the blood vessels are going to narrow to reduce the flow of blood to the skin, so that blood should not lose the heat. So in vasodilation, the blood vessel is going to dilate. For the word vasodilation, vaso means a blood vessel. Then dilation means the blood vessel is going to dilate, is going to increase in what? In diameter. So the blood vessels increase in diameter so that there is increased blood flow. There is increased blood flow to the surface of the skin. The larger the volume of blood flowing to the skin, the more the heat that is going to be lost. So if there is an increased temperature, vasodilation is going to take place so that enough blood flows to the skin, and that excess heat in the body is going to be lost on the skin surface. So this allows more warm blood from the internal parts, that is what we call the core, to flow or to get exposed to the environment, and therefore heat can be lost from the blood by radiation, convection, and conduction. The second point is evaporative cooling. It is also another physiological adaptation. For example, we look at sweating. Sweating occurs in humans and primates, so that during sweating, the sweat is going to get out of blood in form of water, and it gets out of the body with what we call latent heat of vaporization. So when the water is evaporating, it draws a large amount of heat energy from the body, and that one will result into cooling. The second thing is panting. Panting, you have seen dogs opening their mouths, birds opening their mouths when it is too hot. This one is a physiological mechanism aimed at heat loss, because it results that panting results into shallow breathing, which increases air movement over the moist surfaces of the tongue. So when the dog keeps its tongue outside, some of the heat is going to be lost through the moisture on the tongue and the respiratory system. That one will result into evaporation of water from those body parts, and then heat will be lost through those body parts. Then there is saliva spreading. This one can be seen in marsupials and the rodents. They wet their necks, they lick their hair, and once they are doing that, water will evaporate from the saliva, and a lot of it is going to be lost. Basically, those are some of the physiological adaptations that result into heat loss. Then we have behavioral adaptations to varying temperatures. One of them, we shall look at the behaviors that animals show during the cold. Then we shall look at the behaviors that animals show when temperatures are too high. One of them is huddling or grouping. Organisms, when it is too cold, there are some organisms which collect themselves together and group themselves. This helps to reduce the surface area to volume ratio of the group, minimizing collective loss. For example, this one happens in penguins. When organisms collect together, the surface area for loss of heat tries to reduce, so they conserve heat within themselves. Then we have migration or hibernation. Organisms are going to they migrate and go to warmer climates when it is too cold. For example, bird species increase in Africa during winter, in, for example, Europe. Because Europe is near Africa, most birds try to migrate to Africa when the temperatures are too cold in Europe. So you will find that bird species try to increase during the winter because of migration. That is a behavioral mechanism that enables organisms to survive the very cold conditions. Another thing is hibernation. It is a state of dormancy where the metabolic rate and the body temperatures are drastically lowered to conserve energy during scarcity and extreme colds of the winter. Organisms try to make themselves inactive. They become dormant. Some of them can even burrow themselves. They become metabolically inactive, and you find that in so doing, they conserve the little energy they had, and it helps them not to lose a lot of heat. Then there is also basking or seeking shelter. Some organisms try to hide. They orient the body to maximize solar heat absorption. For example, basking, seeking insulated spaces, burrows, and to minimize exposure to the cold air. So some of them try to hide. They seek shelter, they hide. This one even applies to humans. When it is too cold outside, a human will seek shelter, will go inside, close themselves indoors to ensure that they don't die because of loss of too much heat. Then we look at some of the behavioral mechanisms during too much temperatures. These are just few examples I've just given. For example, there are some other examples like organisms coiling. Some other organisms coil to ensure that they reduce the surface area for heat loss. I've not included some of them here. Those ones you can do them for personal research. So one of the things that happens during high temperatures, organisms, they seek shade. This one also happens in humans. When it is too hot, we somehow go into houses. We hide into houses to ensure that we don't lose a lot of heat. We avoid direct solar radiation, and we see cooler microclimates. Other organisms can go underground, they can burrow, others can hide under vegetation. Even humans, by the way, they do hide under what? Under vegetation. You go under a shade tree. So that one is a behavioral mechanism. Another thing is nocturnal activity. Organisms will change their feeding behavior, or they adapt by changing the time at which they feed. So shifting, foraging. Foraging simply means feeding. Foraging simply means feeding. They shift feeding and their activity to the cooler hours of the night. Resting during the hottest part of the day, for example, the desert animals, they make sure they feed at night. Nocturnal activity is a behavioral mechanism that is aimed at 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 ensuring that the organisms do not they do not they are not disturbed by too much heat. Then there is also what we call wallowing. Organisms try to cover themselves with mud. This one can even happen with hippopotamus, it can happen with pigs, it can happen with elephants. All these organisms, for them, they cover themselves with mud when it is too hot, such that now the mud can help them in cooling. So those are some of the behavioral mechanisms that help organisms to lose heat, to lose heat. So this is a summary of how the body responds to um, to increased temperatures and decreased temperatures. Um, or let us look at this. Let us look at this. Let us look at this. Um, let us look at this. Let us look at this. Let us look at this flow chart. Let us look at this flow chart. So here you realize that we have an external stimuli. It could be heat or it could be the cold. There is a sensor. The sensor tries to sense the temperature, and we've talked about this as the temperature receptors in the skin, the spinal cord, and the hypothalamus. So the red arrow is showing increase in heat. When there is increase in heat, the sensors will have to sense it, and that is the skin. I've said the skin, the spinal cord, the hypothalamus. Then we have the coordinator or the integrator. This one compares the sensor input with the set point and then instructs the effectors. It's going to instruct the effectors so that uh, the hypothalamus detects this temperature, and then it's going to order the body to show the responses that we have seen physiologically. So it tells, is that body temperature below or above the normal set point? If it is above the normal set point, we are following the red arrow. You realize that if the body temperature is above the normal set point, blood vessels near the skin will have to dilate. Blood flow increases, heat loss from the skin surface increases, sweat glands are stimulated, and evaporation results, resulting into heat loss from the skin. Respiratory centers are stimulated, panting results into heat loss. Then you realize that when it is too cold, that is the external stimulus, the skin, the spinal cord, and the hypothalamus will have to sense that. And what happens is the body will respond by negative feedback mechanisms. The negative feedback mechanisms, they are these ones we are trying to look at. Blood vessels near the skin will have to constrict and blood flow lessens. Heat loss from the skin surface is going to decrease. Shivering is going to help to generate heat in the muscles. That one is coordinated by the hypothalamus. It is the one that is going to cause that endogenous heat generation, or something we call the thermogenesis. Then chemical signals arrive at the cells and stimulate increase in cellular respiration, resulting in an increased metabolism or increased metabolic rate, which is going to result in heat production. So you can see what we are trying to look at here. You can see what we are trying to you can see what we are trying to look at what we are trying to look at here. So the hypothalamus plays a very key role in body temperature regulation. It works as the body's thermostat during temperature regulation. The hypothalamus is just a small region in the brain. We find the hypothalamus in the brain, and we are saying that it serves as the body's primary thermoregulatory center. And what does it do? It senses and integrates. It receives temperature information from two sets of thermoreceptors. The central thermoreceptors, these are located in the hypothalamus itself, the spinal cord, and other deep tissues. These help to monitor the core body temperature, the internal body temperature. I said the word core simply translates into something internal. Then we have the peripheral thermoreceptors. These ones are located in the skin. The skin is the one that has peripheral, means something that is on the surface, external surface. They detect the external temperature. Then a set point comparison. The hypothalamus constantly helps to compare the chest core temperature and peripheral temperatures to a genetically determined set point. This normal body temperature is genetically determined. So those set points that we are having in the body, the points or the parameters, the set points of the parameters are genetically determined in the body. So what happens is next now it is going to activate the responses. Based on the comparison, it will have compared with the normal set point, and then it will determine that, oh, this temperature is higher than normal, or this temperature is lower than normal. So it is going now to help to activate, it is going to activate appropriate physiological and behavioral responses so that the body temperature returns back to the normal set point. That is what the hypothalamus is going to help us to do. So it will help, for example, to cool down the body through the mechanisms like vasodilation and sweating. Then when it is too cold, it will help to warm up the body. And these are the negative feedback mechanisms I have just showed you in the image. It is going to trigger heat generation mechanisms such as vasoconstriction to prevent heat loss, shivering, non-shivering, for example, increased metabolic rate. Then the second part that we are looking at is the skin, the role of the skin. We have looked at the hypothalamus. Yes, it works as the body's thermostat. What about the skin? The skin plays a vital role. It plays a dual role. Dual means double role. And it works both as a sensing organ, just like the hypothalamus does, and it also works as an effector organ, which is going to help to control or to lower the temperature, or to increase the temperature, or to conserve the temperature. So it plays a sensory role. The skin contains the peripheral thermoreceptors that are sensitive to changes in external temperature. The sensory receptors, the sensory receptors to cold and warmth, we call them thermoreceptors. It sends this message to the hypothalamus. That means there are sensory neurons that send this information to the hypothalamus in the brain. This one is informing the what? Informing the hypothalamus, informing the brain. That is one role that it plays, the sensory role, sensing. the changes in external temperature. Then secondly, it works as an effector organ. The effector mechanism we have looked at, for example, vasodilation. That is what it does. The superficial blood vessels are going to dilate when temperatures are too high so that heat can be lost from the body. It contains the sweat glands. Sweat glands are going to help in evaporative cooling. Cooling by evaporation, we say that as the sweat is being lost from the body, the heat, the sweat escapes with heat of vaporization. This results into evaporative cooling. Then we say that still it is going to help us in heat retention when temperatures are too cold. Vasoconstriction, we have looked at this. Vasoconstriction, we have said this one aims at reducing the blood flow to the skin surface so that we limit the amount of blood that flows there as we conserve the heat. Erector pili muscle contraction, these muscles contract to raise the hair of the skin such that now there is a layer of hair that is trapped around the skin to work as an insulator against heat loss. So you realize that the hypothalamus together with the skin, they form an essential feedback loop that maintains the stable internal environment. And that is what we shall basically be looking at in homeostasis. So today we have so far covered temperature regulation. In our next lesson, we shall be looking at the role of antidiuretic hormone in water balance. Basically, we shall be looking at osmoregulation. Thank you for watching.